Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I see the numbers are pouring in now. Yeah, great. It's my name's Jonathan. I'm one of the directors at Barn Owl. We hold these info sharing sessions every couple of months, and today we are very honored and very happy to have Professor van der Nest, who's the head of the Department of Auditing at Tshwane University of Technology. DP is going to be chatting to us about audit committee effectiveness, skills, and composition. The nice thing with Professor DP van der Nest is that he is a seasoned governance professional, well respected in the academic and education environment, but also has extensive expertise and leadership in serving on audit committees and boards across a wide spectrum of businesses, both nationally and internationally. So to be able to combine the best of both worlds, which is the academic side, but informed by practical experience, is really is going to, I think DP is going to wow us today. And it's not just academic and it's not just theory. So I really, I'm going to just mention one or two housekeeping issues before I hand over to Prof. DP. The presentation that you see today will be on our website. It'll and we will also be recording this session, so the recording will be on our website as well. Everyone is muted at the moment, although you can actually type comments into the chat group, and then I think DP is going to chat for about 45 minutes, and then open the floor. We will Cheryl will unmute everyone, and you'll have an opportunity to put your hand up and ask questions. So yeah, please enjoy the session, sit back and relax. I know it's not always that easy to find the time for these kind of things. And once again, Prof, thank you very much for your time and taking your time to do this. I know you are very, very busy, both in the academic field as well as on boards and audit committees. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for having me. And Jonathan, I must be honest, you're setting the bar a bit high, asking from me to wow everybody. I don't know if I can wow people with audit committees, but let's try. Thank you very much, and thank you for all those that joined. I think we will just have a bit of a discussion in a changing environment as we have at the moment. I think all of you, and I've just scanned through the list, and it's such a diverse audience, which makes it quite difficult, but also interesting, because you are all in different environments and you've got a different reality as well. One thing is certain, that everything is changing at the moment, from the world order to what's happening in our country, down to economies, down to technology development, and it affects all companies, all environments as well. So I hope to touch on a few of these. I just want to share my screen quickly. Right. Jonathan, if you can just indicate if it's visible.
Yes, we can see that. Thanks, DP. Maybe in presentation mode. Yeah, that's great.
Right. Thank you very much. Today, I just want to touch on audit committee effectiveness and skills and composition. And I specifically say in 2026, because 2026 is not the same as 2025 or 4 or 3. It is developing so quickly at the moment that I think some of us are actually struggling to keep up with the speed of change in the environments where you work as well. Just to touch on a few of the key factors for governance and oversight from the audit committee side. If you trace the history of audit committees, there's even evidence of an audit committee that was in the 1800s in the Great Railway Company of the US that was used to appoint auditors. So it's not a new animal, and it has evolved a lot. And the support role that the audit committee needs to play in every environment is increasing and increasing. There was a few articles a few years ago about audit committee agenda overload, and I'm starting to experience that as well. So the requirements and the expectations from an audit committee, whether realistic or not, is and does have an impact on the way the audit committee functions. Just as an introduction and some context, at the moment, why do audit committees and the effectiveness matter? We've got expanded oversight responsibilities. There's evolving risk management. There's the issue of cybersecurity. There's AI governance. That's a topic that we're grappling with at the moment. Sustainability in our companies, especially your manufacturing, your mining industries, alongside the financial reporting. And whether that is just a tick box exercise to make your integrated annual report look good, or whether it is something that has an impact and whether the audit committee is assessing that. There's heightened regulatory and investors' expectations from the audit committee as well. It has become practice for the audit committee chairs to go to AGMs, present the audit findings there together with the external auditors. If you're in government, and I've had that experience again now in January and even last year, you are now requested as audit committee chair to attend portfolio committees at Parliament, and they ask you, what have you done as an audit committee? So the expectations, realistic or not, is increasing. So there will be questions on your capacity in the audit committee and the expertise that you have. And that expertise and the capacity of the audit committee is crucial in this new development. But then there's also changing mandates from our practitioners as well. Our external auditors, our internal auditors. We've got many internal auditors here today. The practices that you implement need to be trusted in terms of being a governance partner in the organization, but also for the audit committee as such. But there's always a context, colleagues, and this makes it very difficult. And I've had the benefit of having served in so many environments and industries in audit committees. And it differs from organization to organization. The environment within which this audit committee functions depends or influences the maturity of the work that the audit committee can do. The governance practices in the organization, your organizational culture, your regulatory frameworks, etc. It has a significant influence on the audit committee. It impacts the audit committee focus and agenda. And a very large part or number of our audit committees still have a largely reactive posture, trying to sort out 5-year-old internal audit findings, 5-year-old external audit findings, and an immature risk environment in the organization. That limits the impact of the audit committee in terms of forward-looking, integrated assurance, etc. So in high maturity environments, if you are lucky enough, I see some companies in here, If you are lucky enough to work or have an audit committee in a high maturity environment, then you move beyond compliance. Then you can spend time on higher value activities. I've chaired audit committees where audit issues are not even identified. It's a given that it is clean. Let's call it clean. The internal audit findings are resolved. So the audit committee can then focus on higher value activities. That's why I closed that slide with the sentence to say, maturity of the environment fundamentally shapes whether the audit committee functions as a compliance guardian or as a strategic governance partner. So that is the context that we must always bear in mind, colleagues, when you look at the effectiveness of an audit committee. Because an audit committee is not operational, it's very dependent on how management is managing in terms of your control environment, your internal controls, risk management, etc. We have an expanding role of the audit committee. We know the key items that should always be on the agenda, but we have moved from financial reporting to enterprise oversight, enterprise-wide risk, and, well, you can say, but we have risk management. We've got a risk committee. If you are to look at your organization and you are objective in assessing how mature your risk management processes are, or whether it is just a tick box exercise to make sure that you do comply with the requirement to have risk management. So the audit committee should oversee that, and that risk management should be beyond your financial reporting. The issue of cyber threats, sustainability, fraud risk, and then evolving technology. And that is something that we are grappling with all over, because technology is evolving quicker than what we could have imagined. The saying, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that is very applicable in today's times. We have to look at interconnected risks, cybersecurity, AI governance, and this impacts your internal controls significantly. You've just yesterday seen the Standard Bank cyber attack and the leaked information. So if you've got a Standard Bank credit card, please check your statement this morning. And it's a bank environment, and we've done research in bank environments, and you know that the bank environments have some of the best cybersecurity, IT controls, etc. And they were able to penetrate that, play around there for 3 weeks, and then ask for 1 Bitcoin to not release the data. And then the data went to the dark web, which I don't know really what it is. All right, so if that happens in a bank, and it has happened in various organizations, should be one of the key focus areas. Are we having enough focus on our strategic risks? Are we prioritizing that? And for this to happen, we need tailored communication for oversight. Our audit practitioners need to make sure that the reports that come to the audit committee gives us the expanded oversight that we need, and for those that are in decision-making roles as well. So you can clearly see, colleagues, that we are evolving as an audit committee environment from the traditional ones to where we need to be in a year or 2 or 3. I can almost not imagine where we will be in terms of the changes. So audit committees are increasingly being held responsible for enterprise trust. I don't know how many of you have read the UK Corporate Governance Code, that came in 2025. I know we've got our own codes in South Africa, but it's always good reading to see best practice from other environments as well, and I enjoy doing that. There's one portion, I think it is provision 29 in that new corporate governance code in the UK, that actually raises the bar for board committees like the audit committee to say that, and if I can read that part, committees must ensure that there is credible evidence that the control framework is designed and operating effectively, and that remediation for control failures is tracked and disclosed. That is now in a corporate governance code written in. And we've got similars in the King over the years, etc. And we've got our PFMA and our regulations. But it is very interesting reading as well. So how reliable is the information that is produced across the organization? If you look at the public sector, we report on the performance of the department. The Auditor General is auditing the quality of the performance information, whether it's reliable. It needs to look at the performance information from where it's generated, collated, and up to where it's reported. So to say that stakeholders, regulators, etc., can they trust what we are reporting? So a key shift then for the audit committee, we no longer ask, is this compliant? You also have to ask, is this credible? Is it complete? Is it useful? And in some cases, the audit committee should or is becoming chief architects of integrated assurance. For responsibilities, we have got our standard ones. We oversee financial reporting, integrity of accounting estimates, the disclosures, internal controls, etc. Internal audit, external audit, we know all of these. But then the developments in enterprise risk management, increased regulatory compliance, and we should also now include technology impacts on controls and reporting. So it is continuously evolving into that direction. If the audit committee is effective, it should link operational, technological, and regulatory issues. Link this to financial reporting, your annual reporting, and governance in the organization. For this to happen, we need the right skills around the table. Now, I remember I chaired my first audit committee 26 years ago, which is some time ago. I'm giving away my age. I started chairing when I was very young. Those years, 26 years ago, you stuck 3 CAs and a CIA in a boardroom, you had an audit committee, and we looked at the financial statements and the reporting and the internal audit and external reports, and after a 3-hour meeting or a 2-hour meeting, we said goodbye and thank you. That was 26 years ago. You cannot have the same audit committee in 2026 anymore. We need the right skills on the audit committee. So you need a broad mix of skills, not only financial. You need a risk management expert. You need an IT expert. Well, we say there, I threw in this term AI fluency, but even I don't exactly know what is AI fluency, because I don't think anybody knows what AI fluency is, because for some it will be to say, yes, I can use ChatGPT and Grok very well. And that is not, I think, where we're heading with AI fluency in the business environment and in the audit environment. Although there are, and I see them, still internal audit functions that use Excel as their basis for auditing. Your cybersecurity experts, and then also industry knowledge. So you need a diverse skill set on your audit committee. And if you don't have that, then you must get experts in. If you have experts in a firm that's contracted to you, the audit committee can be assisted, but we need the diverse skills on that. I'm privileged to serve on an audit committee and we recently appointed, let's call it a real IT expert. And the contribution that person is making is immense because he knows things that I don't know. And at this stage, I won't be able to catch up. So when he speaks, I can keep quiet because I know he is the expert in that environment. And the value that has added to the audit committee and our oversight over the IT environment, the control environment, cybersecurity, etc., was just immense. The members must have sufficient time and capacity to deeply engage with the complex issues that we grapple with in organizations. So in your environment, there should be an evaluation of the composition to identify skills gap. If a person is now retiring or contract is ending, should we get another financial expert or should we get an expert in this field, an engineer, etc.? So it is something that should be considered. But the practitioners always, this is our support, and this is our external auditors, our internal auditors, supporting skills development of the audit committee members as well. I think that is very important for us. How do we sit back and assess the audit committee's effectiveness? When is an audit committee effective? When there's high quality engagement. An effective audit committee, yes, we've got structured agendas and insightful pre-read materials so that we can have focused discussions. Broader than just the normal things that in the audit committee pack, there could be additional information for enrichment of certain new developments, etc. in the environment. Clear risk ownership, and this is a very difficult concept. We've got that risk register, and we've got risk number 1, and it's XYZ, and the rating is extreme, and the control effectiveness is good, and we reduce the residual risk, and the risk owner is listed next to it. We all have those documents. But is there real ownership of those risks? In the audit committee's environment, that is very important for us to know that it is actively managed by the person that is the owner of this. I think open auditor dialogue, very, very important. We need to sit with our internal auditors, external auditors, and they are the ears and eyes of the audit committee. And it's very important to have that open dialogue. And the importance of internal audit and the external audit's role is it can never be emphasized enough for the audit committee. The next one is very interesting, and that's your self-assessments. Now we do this, and there's some templates available. There's from Treasury a template, etc. And we do this as an exercise to say we have done the self-assessment. I do ask, what is the quality and the impact of such a self-assessment? Does it help the committee to improve, to identify shortcomings in the committee, in the skill set as well? So we must be very careful in how we do this and what will the purpose be of self-assessment of an audit committee. It also influences the meeting dynamics and your information flow. The audit committee should be focusing on significant risks. And to assist the audit committee, I think it's always important to have clear visualizations. Using dashboards and summaries, you know, if the audit committee pack, I recently had one, it was 487 pages. So at the beginning of whatever you've reported in your environment, please give me a dashboard, a summary that I can clearly see what is in the 68 pages below, because that assists in identifying emerging issues and it makes the flow of the meeting much better. Open dialogue among management, internal audit is very important. Something that I've picked up, and the majority of the meetings are now like this session we have today, is online. And sometimes I still prefer a face-to-face audit committee meeting. I have one later this afternoon. That's why I'm wearing a tie, colleagues, hoping to force improvement in some outcomes. But with your online meetings, you have people who disappear in meetings. And I like to read facial expressions. Is a certain manager rolling his or her eyes when another one is speaking? There's the communication and the involvement of the relevant stakeholders and management in an audit committee meeting is critical as well. And then we also need insights and yes, this links to the clear visualizations that I spoke of that assist the audit committee in its effectiveness. You know, we sometimes you get a report that is really not even summarized. It's 100 pages report, and you must go and sift through that for a meeting. And I do not like that. I do request and require that we have these dashboards and summaries at the audit committee meeting. This is a very important area, and we are grappling with it in all environments. AI and automation is transforming all our processes. It will change, the auditors in here, it will change, it is changing, and it will change the way that you're auditing, that you are operating. It's beyond ACL and data analytics. It is, I think, such a positive environment if we can use AI in this big data environment that we are to make sense of things and to improve the way that internal auditors report as well. The audit committee fluency, there I just indicated we need sufficient technology fluency to ask informed questions. But you cannot be a jack of all trades. So you need that skills mix so that you have people that can ask these questions. It's a very complex control environment. And cybersecurity, business continuity, disaster recovery, we will need more focus on this in our audit plans because it affects the way that the whole environment, the company, is exposed as well. And then we need our practitioners to have these skills. So when you recruit as a chief audit executive, do you have in your team the skills for everything that we have on this slide? Sometimes I say co-sourcing in this environment is much better. Again, because you cannot be a jack of all trades. Then you source the skills that you need, that you can also, as the practitioner, support the audit committee to say, I've had the experts in this environment in, and this is what we found. And then you can support us in that. Just conscious of time, Jonathan. Just go back there. There's some common weaknesses and areas for improvement in the audit committees. So we need to be able, as an audit committee, to address these gaps. And I've touched on them as we've been speaking this morning. We often face challenges like limited II knowledge, overloaded agendas, unclear risk ownership, outdated member assessments as well. There's the possibility of unaddressed gaps. These weaknesses can reduce your oversight quality of the audit committee. It will increase the chances of control failures if you have overlooked risks. Then we also have some constructive corrective actions that the practitioners can also assist with. Maybe looking at the agenda, should there be some revisions in the agenda? Enhanced dashboards, as I've indicated, summaries, information, providing information to the audit committee, and then also targeted training for the members. And that can assist in improving our governance. Further, in terms of enhancing audit committee performance, yes, we've spoken about annual self-assessments. I've mentioned the design of this assessment is very important, or else it will just give you compliant. The skills matrices, we need to compare what expertise we have, and is this expertise aligned with what is changing in the world, what's changing in my environment, in our business, in our company, in our departments. And then ongoing education programs for audit committees, just to keep audit committee members updated on the new changes, regulatory, technological, and in the reporting environments. Some of you that's in the insurance industry would have known the huge impact that the implementation of IFRS 17 had on some environments within the financial services industry, insurance, life insurance, medical schemes, etc. And in some environments, the whole format of the income statement and the balance sheet, apologies for the old terminology, the impact was huge. So we did have to get sessions for the audit committee to explain the impact of the change in IFRS 17 on how this environment will be reporting, this business will be reporting going forward. If we did not get that training, you would not be able to review the financial statements. Risk dashboards and heat maps, these enhance the visibility and assist with timely audit decision making. We can really move away from some of the old formats of the risk, or rather extract from that will assist the audit committee in its decision making. The audit practitioners, our internal auditors, external auditors, we need you as governance partners. So there's an expanded role for the audit practitioners in terms of providing better insight, foresight, and then context just beyond technical findings. That is very important. We also need our governance partners to anticipate the needs of the audit committee, to anticipate concerns, highlight emerging risks, and to support effective oversight. We need to make sure that we align our audit work with committee priorities, and that will strengthen trust and governance. unfortunately, again, we're back to the maturity of the environment you work in as a practitioner. And I'm not blind to that. If you cannot, as the audit committee, as the internal audit CAE, really do an internal audit coverage plan because of the quality of the risk register and the risk assessment processes in the environment, it is a struggle. But that then has an impact on the work of the audit committee as well. In some environments, that's not a problem. It's easy to do that planning. And then also the practitioners as a governance partner. Effective practitioners, it just assists the audit committee in decision making, resilience, being on top of the changes. The thing is, we see each other every quarter, if we are lucky. And a lot of things happen. So we need the support of our practitioners in this. Thank you very much. Jonathan, I'll hand back to you. I see I did manage to keep a bit earlier than the original time that we set. I just want to stop sharing here. Thank you. I'll hand back to you, Jonathan.
A pleasure. Thanks, Prof. That was a really great presentation. Thank you. I think very informative. I see quite a few people asking where they could get the presentation and where they could get the recording. So it will be on our website. Prof DP very kindly has agreed to share this with us. So that's really good. I think Cheryl's going to open the floor now for some questions. I'm sure there's some questions from the audience. I see we've got quite a big turnout today. So please put your hand up, and the Prof can take some questions. I see no one's putting their hand up. I wanted to ask Prof on MSCOA. We get a lot of requests around mapping risk, your risk environment risks to the MSCOA requirements. I know there are sort of 7 segments to that, and we always say to some of our customers that it still requires. I mean, from a system perspective, it's where we can cater for it, but you've still got to map your MSCOA sections to sectors to your risk registers. So, and we haven't really seen that happening. So, but I know National Treasury have now put that. Well, it's been coming for a long time, but it's a directive basically. So, I don't know whether you've got any insight on that, Prof.
Only that we've looked and seen the Treasury directive, Jonathan. So I think it has been a gap, but that's not my field of expertise. Further than looking at that directive that we've just received from Treasury, but I know even yes, from the municipal side, there's been some lacking in that environment, and then the software only will not be sufficient. There should be that mapping to the register as well.
Yeah, it can't happen automatically, and
No.
It's a great idea, because I've always thought, the more that you can make your risks integrated with the business and related to your budgets and your financials, the more valuable it is. I mean, there are obviously risks that are a lot of risks are non-financial, but if you can map them, it would be very, very useful. So those that you can, and even quantitative risk might get more attention as well, if you know what's at risk from a RAND perspective. Yeah.
And something that is lacking in a number of environments, and one wouldn't believe it's 2026, but the extent of the use of the available GRC resources that is there to assist our CAEs. In some environments, they're using it very well, but there are literally still some environments where they use Excel. So I think in this changing environment, and the AI impact will also impact where you're heading as Barnell and the other GRC environments. Diligent, I just had a meeting with them a while ago as well. So it's something that our practitioners must focus on to improve and to assist then also with the large data that's in the environments to give better assurance to the audit committees as well. I do see a question there in the
chat group, yeah.
In the chat group. I can try and answer that. So the question is, where do audit committees most commonly overstep? It's a difficult question. I see Annalisa requested that, or put the question there. Your audit committee oversteps where you start blurring oversight with operations, where you start trying to give instructions to management on how to manage certain areas, and it's not seen as advisory. Trying to influence certain processes. It's beyond the oversight role. I think in terms of where do they most often under-challenge management, that's very difficult to answer. I think it differs from environment to environment. In what I found in the public service, where management is most often under-challenged, is in terms of enterprise risk management, where it is accepted. This is the risk register, and this is what we're doing. But in terms of challenging, what is the impact of that? But this will differ from environment to environment, to be honest. Action tracking, it's follow-up discipline and the depth of challenge you're asking. How should this feature in an effective assessment for the audit committee members? If it's assessment by the audit committee members, I'm very, shall we say, strict on this. Action tracking is critical for both internal audit and external audit. And the follow-ups on that action tracking. So we should make sure that our action tracking documentation is very complete, that we see exactly what the findings were, what were the recommendations, what management is saying, and then to follow up. I do not like to see something turning green as implemented before we've had the follow-up by internal audit, because we need that additional assurance as well. So it is something that is crucial for the audit committee. I'm just trying to see as well, Jonathan.
There's one more question, and then we will get to Lazarus. Lazarus has got his hand up, but there's a question. Thank you for the presentation. However, boards in the public sector tend to digress depending on the appointing authority. In such scenarios, like skill set mixture may be a challenge.
That is unfortunately true. Boards are in the public sector. It is a different animal, but you must know that there's politics involved in the boards of listed companies as well. So it does happen. So the audit practitioners should also be assisting in making some recommendations. But I understand your question totally. where there's a ministerial appointment of a board, then it does not allow you, let me choose my words carefully, to do that kind of selection. There, the audit committee, with the required independence after that selection. So you've got the board and then the audit committee is appointed. We must make sure that on the audit committee then, we've got that skill set mixture that is missing then on the board, then the audit committee can advise the board. That's the only way that I see this.
I'm going to jump to Lazarus now, because
Yes.
Lazarus has had his hand up for a very long time. So Lazarus, would you like to continue, and then we'll get more to the chat questions again?
Thank you and good morning. Is it Prof. Jonathan Crisp?
Yes, Prof DP, and I'm Jonathan Crisp. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Thank you for the insightful presentation. My question is only one. I wanted to know, I'm aware, and you also already highlighted in your presentation, that is for good corporate governance for audit committee to be, or maybe to have a self assessment of the audit committee annually. But my question is whether is it advisable also to conduct a quarterly self-assessment of the audit committee on top of the annual evaluation of the audit committee members? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question, Lazarus. I think given that the meetings are quite far apart, you will not get the value doing this every quarter. I think an annual assessment reflecting back on the past financial year will be the most effective way to do this. If issues appear during the year, that will have to be dealt with separately. Let's say there's a problem with a member, then that should be taken up with the chairperson and then the accounting officer or the accounting authority or the board. But I do not personally think, and from my experience, that the quarterly assessment will add much value. It is too short a period to properly look at. And you've got your audit committee schedule as well with the activities at certain times of the year, which also need to be evaluated. So I think to see that in a whole would be better. That is my opinion.
I'll read the next question from Myrna. It's quite a long one, Prof. In your opinion, what are the most effective ways an audit committee can drive accountability for repeat findings or findings that remain either not implemented or in progress for a long time, especially where action plan feedback remains vague or not fully implemented? So that's one question. I'm going to carry on and read the rest. Maybe they're related. In your opinion, what level of SCM oversight is appropriate for an audit committee without crossing into operational involvement, especially in municipalities with compliance-related findings? And then the last kind of question here is it necessary to only produce a quarterly report to the AC with basically a broad overview of the internal audits done, or would you recommend providing the AC with the full internal audit reports? So a few questions.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah. Good question.
No, we need a full session just for this. I'll try and answer it briefly. It actually requires some thought, however. In terms of the repeat findings, what the most effective way to do this in an audit committee is to have the managers in and have them accountable for the areas where they are responsible, and for them to explain what is happening. We have gone as far as to recommend that there's consequence management for this. In certain environments, we actually have now gone, and in extreme environments, to have special consequence management meetings. And I know it sounds harsh, but to follow up what has been done in certain areas. Then the action plan feedback that remains vague or not fully implemented is also a problem. Your problem, however, here is where your accounting authority is not supporting the audit committee or internal audit. And that is something that then the audit committee chair will have to make sure that this is taken up. Supply chain oversight, the level that is appropriate. Supply chain oversight will be limited by the audit committee over the various reports that will come from the external auditors and from the internal auditors. You are right, you should not be crossing into operational involvement, but where there's compliance-related findings, we need stronger focus from internal audit. What we normally then do is you have supply chain then as an annual audit on your audit plan, not biannually or every third year, because it is a high-risk area. So the level of oversight, I think, is unfortunately limited to what we receive from our assurance providers in risk management and control from internal audit and external audit as well. The reporting to the audit committee, I request a summary, and also in the presentation, and I like a nice summary and the audit committee of, first of all, the big picture of where we are. This is Q2. This is where we are in terms of our audits. We've done the following. This is the overall rating. Then a bit of a summary of the findings that caused the rating. And then we prefer that the detailed internal audit reports are also attached. So in preparation, I would prefer to look at the summary, and then I can go, if necessary, into the detailed report as well on the specific area that was identified, what was the control failure, and then I can check what was management comments, is this a repeat finding, etc. So I don't think a summary is enough. I also prefer, it depends from chair to chair, but I need to do some more reading after looking at the summary as well. I think that's broadly.
Excellent. Thanks, Prof. Question from Caroline. If some audit committee does not want to attend training such as Global Internal Audit Standard, that we know it's changed, it came out in 9th of January 2025. What approach should one use?
Yeah, again, a very difficult question. It is something that should be actually agreed. It should be made a formal agenda point to say what training will the internal or the audit committee require, what are the recommendations, and that we get agreement, at the beginning of a year already. And then if there's reluctance, then the starting point would be to discuss with the chairperson of the audit committee. And I know, Caroline, if then the audit committee chair also says, I don't want to attend this, then you start running into a bit of a problem. But I think if you have a structured training program and presentations, I normally request that at least if there's such a major change, that we have a presentation at the audit committee of maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes to just give a broad overview of what has changed. So I gave the example of IFRS 17. We had a brief presentation on the changes of IFRS 17, and then we saw there, but we need some more detail what the new formats will be of the financial statements, etc. So I think if it's a structured process and it's included also in the meetings where they are, I know it's difficult to get members to say, okay, you outside of your normal meetings, you need to attend 2 days training. It's very difficult to get that done. So combine this with the audit committee meeting.
Great. So I see we've got 5 minutes left. So Ashwin's got a question. Is it necessary to issue a formal comprehensive follow-up report, or is an executive summary of the open, overdue and closed findings sufficient to be presented to the audit committee? Thank you.
Well, it's again a preference, Ashwin. It will depend on chair to chair. With the original audit reports, as I've indicated previously, personal preference is to have the summaries, good graphics, and all of that, plus the reports at the back. But where we have a follow-up audit, I think just to certify that what has been said as closed is closed, which should be sufficient for the audit committee.
Great, thanks. Another question from Myrna. Would you recommend appointing a specific ICT internal audit team on a contract basis, or maybe get a team on a closed quote, 10 to 3 years, or maybe get a team on a closed quote in once every few years?
It depends on your structure, which I don't know. So we've got environments where it's really developed for internal audit. You've got your CAE, then you've got, let's use the government terms, director ICT audit with 5 or 6 IT auditors. You've got director performance auditing with that, and you've got compliance as well. So if you have those skills, you might source from a panel. If you do not have the skills, I think then you should have the ICT skills sourced. It still forms part of your plan, but every few years, you need to do these annually. So you'll have to follow whatever process will work for you. Some environments appoint a panel of firms. It is allowed, you know that. So you appoint a panel of firms, and then you source what skills you need from that. I think that's sometimes better than just saying we're appointing you for IT audits only. And then when you constitute your panel of auditors, you make sure that you have in there maybe forensic capability, IT capability, just to make it a bit easier for the CAE. But again, it depends on what your structure is, what your capacity is. Some environments where we have the audit committee actually is fully co-sourced. So there's just a CAE with a firm giving all the expertise. So it differs, but you need to get the skills in whichever way in terms of your procurement process.
Yeah, thanks. Just a statement here from Lazarus. We conduct assessments annually. The audit committee do a self-assessment, an assessment of the finance function, and an assessment of the internal audit function. So I think that's not a question. That's just some additional information. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think it's progressive, Jonathan, and it gives a broader scope. And it also, I think, in terms of the standards and the corporate governance codes, it's closer in terms of the requirements. Yes.
Great. And then there's I think the last question from Annie. Thank you for the great presentation. As an audit committee member, what type of report should I expect in combined assurance, and how can I use it to minimize several reports from many assurance providers?
Sorry, I just want to go down to that.
It's the last one.
Yes. in terms of combined assurance, it again depends on the maturity of combined assurance in your environment. If you have, let me give one environment where I was involved. They actually have a combined assurance forum in there. And they've got the combined assurance documents and everything, and then a summary is presented at the audit committee, flowing from the meetings of the combined assurance forum, where then you can see the full picture. And on that forum, it looks at, of course, your risks and the assurance providers. What were the findings from these assurance providers? When will this be followed up, etc. So I think in terms of combined assurance and the type of report that you can expect will really depend on the organization's maturity. Some organizations are still struggling with it. And if you're not mature in terms of your combined assurance, I don't think you can replace reports from other assurance providers as well. I must be honest, in this environment where we had this very mature combined assurance processes, we still also get the report from risk management. We still get the report from internal audit. We still get the report from external audit. So I don't think it limits. I see what you say. Can we just get one report that covers everything? Personally, I don't think we are there yet. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, I think, Prof, what we see often, even in implementations of combined assurance, is that risk management has different rating scales, on the risks and the controls, the adequacy and effectiveness to what audits have got. And then you've got external providers or co-source providers that then have a different scale completely. So you can't compare apples with oranges. You've got to have a common scale or a common taxonomy. You've got to get the data right. So
yes,
it doesn't really matter. Even with AI and all these good things, it still requires structured data. We still got to have structured data and common methodology.
Yeah,
so
no, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks. I see Myrna has puts a link in. I think, thank you very much, Prof, for your time this morning. It's been really insightful, and based on all the questions, I can see people really engaged and are very grateful for your time this morning. So we will put the presentation and the recording on the website. And
Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we appreciate your time today.
And thank you for those that attended. It's such a short presentation. You can't deal with each and every industry that there is. And believe me, each environment is different. But it was an honor to share with you the little that I know of this, and want to wish you well in these changing times. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.